first understand the flow and then we will do a deep dive into Keycloak. So let's say this is your web application, right? Consider not Google, it's just a representation. Consider that this is your web application running in a browser. So your browser, and then there is some company, Urban Dior, and let's say it's a retail chain. Your software consulting firm is giving services to this Urban Dior retail chain, right? So it has a Keycloak as an authorization server, and then there is one ticket service in the Urban Dior. So your web application that is running in the browser will send this API, right? Connect Auth API to your Keycloak. So when I say this API, that means it will ask for a authorization code, right? Basically a code. Then based on then this guy, right, will reroute from your application to a Keycloak user login. So because here you must be, for example, you are logging into this web application, you must be logging username and password, right? As a user, what I mean, so when you try to access an API, then your call first goes to in order to get the access token, refresh token, to call the resource server, you first, as part of the login flow, you must be calling the Keycloak. Then from Keycloak, if you are trying to generate a code, then the Keycloak will automatically reroute to your Keycloak user login screen, there where user have to key in the username and password of that particular user, and then once that is successful, it will send the code to a callback URL. So let's say if your application is running in a localhost 8082 port number, then it will send the code to the callback URL, which will be configured as part of Keycloak. We will see that in the later part of the lecture. And then once it has the code, it will now call again the Keycloak for asking for the access token and refresh token. So when I say access token, refresh token, all those things come as a single JSON response, right? Then Keycloak will say that it's an authorized code. It will generate the access token, refresh token, send it back to the application. Now application has all these details. It will call the ticket server by passing the access token, and then it will send the response because it's the authenticated, the correct one, right? So now you see Keycloak looks like this. So if you see Keycloak, I have already written here that Keycloak, and by the way, Keycloak is being owned by Red Hat, right? And it also known as IDAM, identity and access management. So generally in the organization language, people generally call it the access management, and access management is the role of authorization, right? Because you manage the access of a user in the different stages, right? So you and most of the organization that are relying on the open source stack are kind of using heavily the Keycloak day in day out, right? And then there are several features. You can implement any type of grant type in using Keycloak, right? So now we will try deploying Keycloak in the Docker container. I already have Docker container. You can go and search around the Keycloak in the Google. So you can use this kind of command. This I have taken from the official website of Keycloak, and then you can go to the Docker Hub, look for this QAY.io Docker image of Keycloak, and then start using it. So it's just nothing but a simple Docker container I'm running on this port number, and then the admin and the password is same admin and admin, right? And running in the dev mode. So I already have this running. Before making this video, I was playing around with it, right? So now let's see. Now let's try to generate one. Now let's try to create and configure the Keycloak from very beginning, right? Now if I go to localhost 8080, you will see this screen, right? I will log in. So you need to create first a realm, right? I have already created one realm. So realm is nothing but your tenant. So when I say tenant, for example, if your consulting firm has let's say a shared environment, and then you have multiple tenants running in it. So you might, if you are giving your services to one customer, your customer could be one tenant, right? So a tenant is nothing. Let's say this organization I'm giving services to, so I've configured a realm for it. So it's a tenant, right? That's it. So I'm now inside my tenant. Now in order to generate the access token, I first need to create a client. So that client will represent the same client, for example, the browser application that will be calling that particular to authorization server, right? From all calls will be originating from. So that's our client, basically browser client, right? And then there could be mobile client, there could be, let's say, Android client. You could create a number of clients. So accordingly, as per the clients, you will create roles and all those things, right? Now I am already inside Urban.io. So if you go to clients, I have already created one, right? Ticket service app, right? This app, this client. Now if you go to ticket service app, this is the client ID, correct? And then this is the callback URL. And then, so this callback, as I said, callback URL will be used when you are trying to generate a code. The code will be sent back to the this particular callback URL. So assume at this URL your service is running. Have you seen those kind of application where when you log in, the moment you log in, you go back to your application, right? For example, when you do some OTP transaction from a web application, then your SBI or whatever bank you are using, that kind of window gets pop up. You enter all those username and password, and then once it is successful, you get rerouted to your application, right? So that is the callback URL. And then this is my client ID. That's it. And then here, the moment you will create the client, it will automatically generate a client secret for you. All right. And then once you do that, you will have to create roles. So for example, in your organization, in your ecosystem, there will be a number of roles, right? For example, there could be one admin role, there could be a basic user role, there could be some super admin role, or there could be some permission, for example, admin who can only give you the permission. So those kind of different personas and roles you can define here. So for example, here if you see, I have created one visit user role, which can only read the data from my APIs, right? And then you can add different attributes, key and value. For example, if there is some unique identifier you want to set for this user, right? You can call it unique ID or user ID or etc. You can keep those attributes right here, right? Now, once you do that, I have created one user and assigned this role to it. So you can go to user and then search for the username. So I have created one test user here, if you see, right? And then this ID will automatically be generated. You need to put in an email, but however, that's not mandatory. And then you can set a password to it. And then role mapping, I have already assigned this user a visit user role. All right. So now what I'll do, so this is very basic. You don't have to fall into these things because in your organization, you won't be the person who will be configuring it. Maybe someone senior or the DevOps team will be configuring it, right? And it's not very customized for the production use case. It's only for dev. And then if you go to this open ID endpoint, you will see all the endpoints, right? That the endpoints that you can use to grant the auth and to generate the tokens and all those things, the login and the logout, all those, right? Everything is right here. Now let's directly jump to the important part, but however, the understanding of it is very important. If sometime, right, you get this chance of configuring the Keycloak, right, as part of your dev job, you might be doing it, but that's okay. So now what I'll do is I have already created some API. For example, if you look at this API, right, this is the token generating API. But I don't want to do that. Before that, what I want is, if you go to collections, go to authorization code, right? Okay. So this is the API that I want. So this is the same auth API, which will grant me the auth. So if you go here and look for the API, this is this API, authorization endpoint API, to basically start the process of authorization, right? So now, if I go to my Postman, and then, so I have given my client ID. If you see, my client ID is, this is my client ID, ticket service app, right? And then I have this, my response type is my code, because the code I want back from my authorization server. Scope is nothing, but you can have a different type of scope. For example, if you go here, I'll say these are the scope you can define, right? So scope defines, it's very granular privileges. For example, if you have a visit user role, you want to allow that visit user to access ticket service, but you do not want to allow some other service. If you want to allow a user to only 3 services, not all the services. So those are the granular scopes that you can assign. For example, there is an offline scope, right? So that you can use to generate your lifetime validity refresh token, right? So when you log into Facebook gives you, let's say, X6 token refresh token back. So the refresh token that you have now, it will never expire because you have the offline access to it. And so those kind of things you can play around with the scope. And then you have basically the redirect UI, and then you have the state has no significance. I don't know why they have introduced, but these are the important parameters that you could use. So right, so what I'll do, I'll go here and I'll open one window. Let's say I'll open my Google Chrome and then put it here. See, so now you see it rerouted me to Urban Dior, right? So it's my tenant is Urban Dior, and then it's under the domain of Urban Dior. Now it's asking user to key in the username and password. So I've already given test user my username and password. So it's asking for the authorization, right? So it's same thing. If you remember in this article, what I said, the moment you will ask, it will reroute it to your Keycloak user login screen, right? Now you can go here and then now the moment I'll click, it will take me to a callback URL, the localhost 8082, right? If you remember, this is the local host URL I have given already. So this should be the same as, if you go here and then if you go to client and then go here, then this should be the same valid URI which I have given in the Postman, right? Consider Postman as my client who is keep on sending all these APIs to the authorization server, right? And then once I go to my here, so I'll sign in. So you see it has taken back me to the same callback URL and it said callback, right? And then it has sent me some details. So the important one, the code that it has sent me back is this code, right? Now this is the code that we need to use in order to generate the access token and refresh token, right? If you go here and see that once it receives the code back, it again sends the API to generate the access token and refresh token using the code, the same code, right? So now what I'll do is I'll go back to my collection and open this API. Now this API, you see, I'm asking the grant type I'm having. You see, remember the grant type, the authorization code is my grant type, and then my client ID is my ticket service app. If you remember in my Keycloak, I already have this ticket service app, right? Very simple. And then this is the client secret. So the moment you create a client, you will have a client secret. Now, why do you need a client secret? You see, this is my client secret value, and I've copied it here. Why do you need client secret? Because let's say there are different client applications from where those applications are calling the authorization server APIs. But how can I ensure that your APIs are being originated from a trusted source? Okay. So one way to identify this is sharing one secret value, right? So if your client is along with the API sending that client secret value, so I can understand, okay, this call is being originated from a trusted source. Otherwise, if somebody has those parameters, anyone can call this API, right? And I can grant the access token, which is very specific to a user, to anyone, right? Which is not correct way. So this client secret value I have copied here, and this is the same code. Now code, how can I get the code? If you go back, and then if you go back to your browser, from here you need to copy the code value. So I'll copy this and then I'll paste it here. Then again you have the redirect UI, and then scope is I have given any scope, read custom scope, anything, right? That's not relevant, but the concept of scope I have already explained you. So in the body, so this is a post call, not a get call. So this post call, I'm sending all these parameters as X form URL encoded. Now if I send this back, it says invalid grant, code not valid. So maybe I have not copied the correct code, right? So I'll go back and see if that's the correct code or not. I'll copy this again and then I'll send it here. It says, alright guys, so there was some issue with the auth code, but I generated the code again. So now I've basically sent the authorization again, and so it generated me another code value, this value. Now I'm using this value, see 4 4B90. I'm using 4B90. Now this time it's generating me so now it says invalid grant because I've already used that value, right? So now what I'll do is I'll go here, and then I will send the value again. I'll go here and then I'll paste again. Okay, so it has given me a new code. I'll use the code and then I will use it in the ATN RT, right? Okay. Oh, sorry, one second. Alright, so now you see it has generated me the access token and refresh token. So it's the whole response, JSON response, right? It has the access token, it has the expiry, it has the refresh token expiry value, it has the refresh token, and the token type is BRR. You can ignore all these fields. These are not relevant to us, maybe for some clients, but we are not using any session or anything, right? We don't have to use. The important parameters are till here, right? And you see this is the access token. Now what you can do is we can go to jwt.io and then you see what your token is carrying, what information your token is carrying. You see this is all the information your token is carrying, which is the expiry time, right, and the allowed origins, roles. The important is the roles, right, and then the accounts, the roles, and all those things. And you can add on few more details, right? This is very basic version of the configurations I'm running, and it has the scope as well, and it basically has some other details relevant to the user, right? Now on the client side, what you could do is, or maybe if you are writing some kind of resource server, a microservice, you can write a filter. So that filter you can check for the role access. If you are receiving an API call via the filter, that is only that particular API is only allowed to the visit user, right, or maybe some admin. So you should look for the role admin, and then you should also look for, let's say, for particular scope, and then you should also see that if the email which is using is the correct email or not. All those information, that the custom implementation you can use, right, as part of your security checks, security configuration at the application level. Another important point is, because there is framework available in Spring Boot, Keycloak, Spring Boot already supports Keycloak, so there are different attributes, key in property that you can use application.yml as part of your Spring Boot security, and then it will automatically do all those things for you, right? So entirely depends on you how you want to custom the security configuration in your application, right? But the point is, that is how you can generate the access token and refresh token, and then you can play around with it. Now let's say, now this is, you see, refresh token. In my last lecture I told you that refresh token generally has the expiry larger than the access token expiry, because access token and then later, let's say, what happens when this access token gets expired after some time, 300, right, maybe your token gets expired. Now what happens after that? Then this client, your client, web browser application, mobile client, whatever it is, will have to send a refresh token and generate the access token again. For example, if I want to generate the access token using the refresh token again, I can do that. So there is an API, already the same API, but you will have to use the grant type as the refresh token, right? Now here I'm using the same client ID, client secret, and now I'm passing basically a refresh token. If you send, then you see you again getting a pair of refresh token and access token, right? So now that is how you can generate the access token and refresh token. Now you can see what your refresh token is carrying. Not much information it carries, right? Very basic information. You see it carries all this information. For example, what is your realm, what's the type, your scope, right? And then all those things it carries. But your authorization server will understand that this is the refresh token grant type, so I will have to create a access token refresh token using this refresh token for the same user. So if your client has the access token and refresh token, and you have a refresh token that never expires, then whenever you log in, you don't have to log in your local again. For example, if you have some application in your local or in your browser, that authorization server has given you access token refresh token. Again, the refresh token expiry is for lifetime. expiry. So it won't expire it never expires, right? So what happens is whenever your access token gets expired, so your refresh token call will go to authorization server, and then your client will again generate a access token. So you can keep on using the authorization server. However, those things will not happen in front of you, but behind the scenarios, all these things will be happening. Now, there are some companies or there are some applications that are using the refresh token at 6 months, 1 year, and for those you might have seen, for example, for a longer time, if you are not using Facebook, you are not using any of the website, then when you log in after 6 months or 1 year, you see you have to log in with your username and password again, because your refresh token might have got expire, right? Maybe this is not the implementation, but that's the analogy I'm trying to explain you. So that's how it works behind the scenario, and that's how your access token and refresh token looks like, right? And that's how you secure your application. Since you have these details, you can create the configuration, you can write the custom implementation for security in your microservices, and you can use it, right? You already have Spring Security Framework, a very beautiful framework to implement the security in your application. All right, just so far we understood the Keycloak and how can you generate the refresh token and access token using authorization code. And then what happens in the username and password, you don't have to do this part, right? Authorization code. Rather, you can directly use this call and you can send your username and password, right? And then you can generate username, password, client ID and client secret, and you can directly generate your access token and refresh token. But this generating code added one more layer of security, because the username and password is the entering username and password is not something which is owned by the client, right? Because your client is in a different domain and your security or authorization server is in a different domain. So when you try to access that authorization server, it asks you first the username and password. So it redirected you the different login screen, right? So that's the concept of, so that's how your whole Google login with Google, login with Facebook, all those things works as part of your OAuth2 framework. All right, guys. So far in this video, this is it. And probably in next video we'll cover some other technical topics, and then we'll do a deep dive into it. Thank you so much.